In a world full of lies and deception, it takes courage to speak truth. In a nation half bent on its own destruction, it takes honor to seek a return to glory. Join us in cutting through the lies and propaganda. It's time for Cutting Through the Chaos on the America Out Loud Network. Here is your host, Wallace Garneau.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cutting Through the Chaos on the America Out Loud Network, where we cut through the lies and the propaganda to bring you the out loud truth. I'm your host, Wallace Garneau, and I think we've got a great show for you today. Ken W. Good, a noted bail attorney and a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, is joining us today. Good has worked closely with lawmakers and other individuals on bail matters. Ken W. Good has over 25 years' experience handling and assisting in a large number of cases that cover a wide spectrum of areas, including business and medical liability claims, products liability, patent claims, Texas tort and surety, and fidelity bonds. Ken has argued important cases before the Supreme Court of Texas and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Ken has the distinction of winning his first cases in both the Supreme Court of Texas and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals 9-0. Which means that all of the judges agreed with Ken's arguments. Ken grew up practicing law in the area of medical malpractice defense. He was taught early on that you are nicer to the opposing side than they are to you, and you are also meaner to the opposing side than they are to you, and you allow the other side to set the tone. Ken has many years of experience drafting proposed charges, arguing the charging conference, and handling the subsequent appeals. Ken has been the go-to guy for numerous attorneys as a problem solver for big problems. Ken has extensive experience being first chair at trial and in giving legal backup to others. Approximately 15 years ago, Ken was hired by a bondsman to assist in setting aside 45 default judgments, and when this was completed, word of mouth spread, and this area has grown into a statewide practice representing insurance companies to underwrite bail bonds. Bar admissions, Texas. He's the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas, U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, and U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. Texas being a large state, it has to have 3 districts. His education, he has a B.A. from Harding-Simmons University, a Master's of Education from Texas A&M University in Tarleton, and a J.D. from Texas Tech University School of Law. Ken, a couple of studies that have come up recently. One is a study from California's Yolo County District Attorney's Office that suggests that the reoffense rate of defendants released on zero bail caused a 163% rise in total crime and a 200% rise in violent crime, whereas a study from researchers at Drexel University finds no evidence that eliminating cash bail increases violent crime at all. I read through those studies. The Yolo County study showed that of the almost 600 people released without bail, 420 of them, that's more than 70%, that's almost 71%, were rearrested, and 29% of them for violent crimes, including murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, robbery, carjacking, and domestic violence. Individuals released on zero bail were 163% more likely to commit crime than individuals released on bail, reoffending at a 70% higher rate. District Attorney Jeff Riesig stated from the Yolo County study, the results of this recent study on the actual impacts of zero bail policies clearly demonstrate that victimization dramatically increases and public safety is significantly compromised when bail is eliminated as a tool for use by the courts. The Drexler study showed that there was no change in fatal and non-fatal gun violence in New Jersey after substantial declines in jail incarceration under bail reform. Against this backdrop, we have cities around the country, such as New York and L.A., that have George Soros-sponsored DAs who have radically reduced prosecutions. This goes along with police forces around the country where the police are afraid of becoming the next YouTube sensation in a non-positive way due to a confrontation with inner-city residents who are becoming increasingly resistant to arrest. Obviously, you're a highly educated man with a wealth of experience in various areas of law. I notice you don't mention anything about a personal life in your bio, so I guess the first question I want to ask you is, you went to Texas A&M. Does that mean that you are not a Longhorn?
Well, I'm not a Longhorn, but I went to Texas Tech, which is not a Longhorn, and it's not an A&M fan either. It's the what is the long the we have a raider is what we are. If their mascot is someone who rides a horse across the football field.
I asked that because I went to the University of Michigan and we have the Texas Longhorns on on our schedule this year. So
Sure.
when I saw Texas, I thought, I hope he's not a Longhorn.
No, no, but I am married. I have two kids. I have my youngest is a freshman, just finished her freshman year and is fixing to start her second year of college.
Oh, how exciting. I've got a son in college. That's very
Yeah,
exciting.
it's both great and stressful all at the same time. I remember how excited I was to go to college. I vaguely remember my mom crying when my brother went to college, but I can so identify with parents now that you have kids in college. You worry about them. You think about, are they making friends? Are they, being successful in school? And so it's a whole new, it's a whole new thing when you're going through it, when your kids are going to college. You don't even think about those things when you were going through. And
Well,
in our age, I probably called my parents once a week. I mean, I want to talk to my kids whenever I want to talk to them, not once a week.
yeah, I remember when I got divorced, I actually bought both my children's cell phones at relatively young ages just so I would have access to them. I know exactly what you're talking about. You have any hobbies?
Oh, yes, I go through hobbies periodically, and I go through hobbies for years at a time. So, at one point in time, I had a hobby of Christmas lights, and so I was at some point, or at one point, I had a wireless network in my front yard.
Oh, cool.
All of the lights controlled by computers with a radio station, blaring music. And, so it started out with, I just wanted to turn on the lights all at the same time and turn them off. And it went from that to being in the New York Times over my Christmas lights.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, no, my wife would not. My wife told me one time, can you do something halfway? You seem to just, when you decide on a hobby, you have to go all out.
Well, you probably go all out in your professional life too, so that's probably actually a good thing.
It is. And, there was a guy that taught me to practice law, and he's retired now and he's starting to have dementia, but he was probably one of the best defense attorneys in the state at the time that, he mentored me into practicing law. So I give him, if I do things right, I give him credit. If I do things wrong, it's his fault.
Have you ever watched Boston Legal?
Yes, but that's, when I was in law school, the big show was LA Law.
Oh, sure.
So, the law school just about shut down when LA Law was on. I mean, that's kind of dated now, but that's how old I am. Boston Legal was kind of after, after the time where I really wasn't watching TV very much anymore. And I don't really watch TV very much at all now.
Well, I ask that only because when you say that you want to be nicer than the opposing counsel, but also
Mhm.
meaner than the opposing counsel, I immediately think of Alan Shore, who, of course, is one of the prominent attorneys on that show. What drew you into law?
Oh gosh, this is a terrible story, but my mom and I stayed up on Sunday nights to watch Perry Mason. The news was from 10 to 10:30, 10:30 to 10:35 was the sports extra, and from 10:35 to 11:35 on Sunday night was they'd play an old episode of Perry Mason. My mom and I stayed up every Sunday night and watched that for years, and so I always had a dream of going to law school, but it was never a goal. It was just a dream. So I had a car accident when I was a senior in college, and that ended up going into litigation. And through that, I saw, well, shoot, if my attorney can do that, and why can't I do that? And so then it became a goal. And so I got a master's degree, applied to Texas Tech, got in, and then loved it, did well. I was on law review. I was on several national teams, excelled and helped me get jobs. I was, on court TV pretty early in my career, argued appellate cases in the mid-mal world where we went to a seminar on medical malpractice, and they had a section on new and important cases from the appellate courts, and three of the five cases were mine. But even then, the legal industry will bring you down to earth because I argued a pipeline case at the Texas Supreme Court and won it. And then probably about 5 or 6 years later, I went to an appellate seminar and they were talking about some of the worst decided cases from the Supreme Court, and one of the cases they highlighted was mine. And I was like, I won that case. Don't tell me it was wrongly decided. So
That's hilarious. Now, you got into bail law because you were hired by a bondsman to assist in setting aside 45 default judgments. Does that mean that there were 45 judgments that there was something wrong with that were going to get thrown out, and so you had to step in and save those cases?
Yeah, so 45 cases where he didn't file an answer. And so once you're served, if you don't file an answer within a certain time, they can just go and enter judgment because you got notice and you didn't appear. So you decide not to defend yourself. And so he had 45 judgments entered. And so he asked somebody, who do you hire to set those aside or help you try to get those set aside? And they said, you need an appellate attorney. And so he hired me, and we were successful in doing that. And then as a result of that, from word of mouth, I've just started getting more calls in the bail world, and started out with bondsmen having issues, and then developed into a statewide practice. And I represent several insurance companies. I'm on the board of the state association. I'm on the legislative committee. We propose bills to the legislature. We oppose bills at the legislature. I argue before the legislature, and, on and on and on. I have my own podcast about bail issues. So we just try to educate legislatures and the public on different aspects of bail and criminal justice reform.
It's funny how many people will maybe they start out in one area, but something draws them into another area. Then they just kind of get sucked into it. And it might not be what they intended to make their career on, but all of a sudden that becomes what it is. It's amazing how many times I hear some version of that story.
Well, you just got to find a job,
sure,
and then you want to excel at it, and then
sure,
you just follow that. And that's really how you create a career.
Well, you never know where opportunity is going to come from. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, you specialize in alternative dispute resolution, appeals, business, collections for the bail bond industry, drafting proposed legislation, insurance defense, personal injury, surety and fidelity bond matters, and testifying before the Texas legislature on bail bond matters. Now, I think some of those are pretty obvious. Like, I think everybody's going to know what an appeal is. But what exactly is alternate dispute resolution?
Well, that's like going to mediation. So, today in litigation, especially in Texas, before you go to trial, the court's going to send you to mediation. And, so I think I like to say the best class that I ever took in my undergrad, my master's, or law school was a class in law school on nonverbal communication. And so at some point, I was going to a lot of mediations at one point, and I got really good at reading people. And ignore what they're saying. What's their body saying? So when they're saying, "Hey, I'm going to make you this offer, and this is all we're ever going to offer you. This is it. We're never going to offer you another dime." Don't listen to what they're saying. Listen to what their body is telling you, and you can pretty much tell whether their mouth may be saying one thing and their body may be saying something else. And I'm pretty good at reading people from that, and so I can tell pretty good if you're lying to me. But it's something that so it helps me in everything that I do. But also, when I go to mediation, and I tell the other side, this is my final offer. I will not offer another dime. Sometimes they're shocked when they come back and say, well, this is what they've offered. And I'm like, okay, well, we won't have another counter. And they said, you meant it? And I'm like, I don't say it unless I mean it. Well, they said, other people say it all the time. I said, well, I want my reputation to be that if I say this, then that's what I mean. That doesn't mean we're done. Then we get into the creative aspects of mediation. And so it's really, it's a very high art, mediation is, because everything that you do, you're sending a message. And I think a lot of people don't realize you should be looking for receiving the message they're sending, not just the words. And if you look at it that way, usually I'm pretty good. If you give me an opening offer, I can tell you where we're going to end up, probably within pretty close.
So you said interpersonal communications was a class that taught you those skills?
Well, a class that I took in undergrad, I said law school, but I meant undergrad on, nonverbal communication. And it's a class on all about what does your body say when you're talking.
When I was in college, that class was called interpersonal communication. When you say that, I think that's funny because one of the reasons I ended up in the Marine Corps for a period of time, in the military for 8 years, was that I failed that class twice. And my parents were paying for my college. And after I failed the same class twice, they said, yeah, you're not taking this seriously. We're not going to pay for this anymore. I was too young to get a loan for college. So I just, well,
Mhm.
I guess I'm going to the military for a bit.
My class like that was economics. I took economics twice, and every time I took it, I had one grade until the final, and then after the final, my grade dropped a whole letter grade because of the final. I don't know
Oh,
what it
wow.
was. I don't know what, but that happened to me both times I took it. I passed, but I had a lot higher grade before I took the final.
Yeah, my interpersonal communications class, the class was taught by an honest to God hippie who was getting toward the end of
Mm,
her retirement age. All the other hippies followed Ronald Reagan, of course, and became yuppies in the 80s. She didn't get the
sure.
memo, so she was still purely a hippie. I remember one time in class, the first time we were talking about, it should have been called Male Bashing 101. And
Mm,
we were sitting in class, and she was talking about how men fail to express their feelings and how men need to express their feelings more. And me being a young Republican, I shot my hand up. When she called on me, I said, well, maybe if you women would drop the let's go shopping attitude and listen to what we actually have to say, the fact that we're not expressing our emotions in nonverbal cues wouldn't bother you so much. Just take us at our word. And so anyway, I failed the class. I had to take it because of the requirement for my major. I took it a second time. She asked me, she said, Wally, what are you doing in my class? I said, what's the requirement for my major? I have to be here. She said, you realize I'm just going to fail you a second time.
mm,
I said, I don't think you understand. I'm going to regurgitate everything you tell me, whether I agree with it or not. I'm going to be your best student. I'm going to write whatever you want, all of my papers. I'm going to ace this class. It's not going to be an issue. She said, no, I'm going to fail you. True to her word, I did everything she said. She failed everything I did. I went to the dean. The dean said, we got to back our professor. My parents stopped paying for me to go to school. And I'm not going to say opportunity came knocking. It forced me down a different road than I otherwise was going to do. But as with bail bond for you, getting into that almost unexpectedly, my life would
mhm.
probably have been very, very different had that not happened. So
Well,
that's
when I started getting or developing my own practice in the bail world, I don't know if it was really well received by my partners, but I still had this whole other practice with my, partner that we were doing medical malpractice defense. And, you know, I finally had to start giving that away.
sure.
And we got to the point where, someone else was doing all of his discovery, but when he came time to go to trial, he still wanted me to go to trial with him. And I'm like, you can't keep doing this. And he's like, well, we've never lost together. And I'm like, yes, but you've got somebody who's doing all the work and he needs the training on going to trial and he
Yes.
will do just as good a job as I did, maybe in a different way, but he'll be just as good. And so I finally had to ask him to not take me to trial with him anymore. And so he didn't. But it still worked out for him. I mean, the
Good.
other guy did a good job. I mean, just, he wasn't me. And, it's the funny thing is when I started working with this other attorney, I hated him because you couldn't tell what he was thinking when you looked at him and because he had such a good poker face. But after 5 years, because we worked probably for 20 years together, I could tell you exactly what he was thinking by looking at him, and he didn't change. I just got really good at reading him.
Sure. When you do collections for the bail bond industry, is that
Hmm.
like Dog the Bounty Hunter type of stuff?
No, collections is when you agree to pay so much premium, or you don't go to court, and so the bondsman has to pay for the bond to the county, and so that is reaching out to whoever the defendant, the indemnitors, asking to compensate the bondsman for what they agreed to and didn't pay.
Gotcha. But purely law stuff, purely lawyer stuff. You're not like
Well, it's
putting a
just a
gun on and
business.
going out to
Yeah.
find people. Okay. I
No, it's
saw
just a
that and I
contract.
thought that would be an interesting segue for the conversation.
Well, I mean, I can't see you, but you can see me. It's like it wouldn't take much for anybody to beat me. A little old lady could knock me over. I mean, uh, I mean, no, I wouldn't just pick a fight with anybody.
Moving on to some criminal justice questions in general. Since you're a lawyer, I've got some
Sure.
questions I want to ask you just about our criminal justice system, if you will. And I find sometimes that when solving problems with particular systems, there's often a temptation to take many long-held assumptions, just take those for granted. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take a giant step backward and ask you, as a member of the criminal justice system, if we were to step back as far as we can and say, let's try to remove any assumptions we have about the American criminal justice system, the first question that comes up to me is, what is the purpose for a criminal justice system? So I would ask you, what is, if our criminal justice system were running correctly, what would the purpose of the criminal justice system be?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to quote the current mayor of New York, Adams, because I think he probably says it better than I could. He said, the foundation of society is public safety. And so if you can't provide public safety, you don't have a society. So what's the purpose of the criminal justice system? It's intended to provide public safety. And I would expand upon that. It allows society to function and grow and be successful.
That makes sense. It provides safety and allows society. That makes all the sense in the world. I asked that because I was a debater in high school, and there was a topic one year. This actually came up before I was in high school, but it was still being used as an example for a particular type of argument that was very effective, but that wasn't used very frequently in debate. That was called disparate aims. The nature of that argument was that any system that has contradictory goals cannot work, as working on both goals at the same time will prevent either goal from being achieved. Our criminal justice system was the primary example that was always used whenever this type of argument called disparate aims was given, even though it wasn't a topic. It was a topic that had come up 2 or 3 years before I was in high school, but it was just a great example.
I understand.
Yeah, when I look at our criminal justice system, which was, again, the primary example they used, the contradictory goals of the system were that it was trying to rehabilitate criminals into law-abiding people, and at the same time, it was trying to punish them as a deterrent to future crime, not only by the people who were being punished themselves, but by other people that might see that might, if you get punished, if you get arrested, this is what's going to happen to you. There was a deterrent effect there, and now, when I see that as that disparate impact, or those two goals.
Well, I think that's too simplistic, because I think a lot of people don't realize that our criminal justice system is intended to be very individual in nature. So when you are arrested for the first time, then the goal of the criminal justice system is to apply only the amount of pressure needed to be applied to you to get you to conform to be a productive citizen. And so what's going to be needed for you as a first-time offender is little. I mean, that's what the system would assume. And as you get arrested more and more times, so if I'm a 10-time offender and I get arrested for the same thing that you've been arrested for the first time, then the system would assume that more pressure needs to be applied to me, and very little pressure needs to be assigned to you. And the pressure that needs to be assigned to me may include that I'm a danger to public safety. And so part of that pressure may require incarceration, because, one of the theories of criminal justice is I don't know if we call it punishment, but we call it, if you will not conform, then you need to be isolated away from society for the sake of public safety. And I think if we think of it in those terms, I think we think of it, that's where we've lost our way, because we keep saying, well, if you've been arrested for stealing a Cadillac converter and I've been arrested for it too, you've been arrested for it once and I've been arrested for it 10 times, LA and New York, New York City with those DAs would say, well, y'all need to be treated the same because you're both committed the same crime. That's not how our criminal justice system was built. And that's where we're going astray currently.
Well, if we assume that we do, that it does still work, where if I'm a first offender, I don't get as strict of a penalty as you do. And I hear you that as they make mandatory minimums and things like that, we move in that direction. Okay, so if you don't go to prison, I get that the conflict isn't there. But once you're in prison, isn't there a conflict between both trying to punish and rehabilitate at the same time?
Well, I don't believe is the purpose of prison to rehabilitate. I think that's one of the hopes. But I think by the time you get to prison, you have a debt to society, and think of it as a debt for a lack of public safety. And so, we even say you've paid your debt to society, so you get out of jail. But I don't think there's a conflict there. I mean, the purpose of prison is to isolate people who will not conform to be productive members of society and who are jeopardizing public safety. The problem we have right now is our prisons are full, and they're full of really, really dangerous people who are not conforming there. And we have new people coming to the country all the time, and we're finding out more and more that a lot of them are criminal elements from the countries they came from. And so what would we expect from them but more crime?
You're in Texas. Do you have any idea what percent of the people that are being committed for crimes are legal residents versus people that are they're in the country illegally?
What percentage?
In Texas, in Michigan, I'm
Well,
sure it's
okay,
very different.
let me say what percentage? No, but we have a big old scandal going on right now because we have a 13-year-old girl in Houston who snuck out of her house in the last 3 weeks, and she was found by two gentlemen who were here illegally, but they were also members of gangs from where they came from, and they raped her for over an hour, and then they killed her and they dumped her body into this little stream,
Oh,
probably
wow.
really close to where they live. And so it's all come out, and I mean, you can imagine it's just gone crazy. The lieutenant governor has announced that they're going to propose a constitutional amendment about these types of crimes cannot be released from jail, and they need to be held without bail, and that they're going to name it in this girl's honor. So right now you've got a really hot topic going on, and I think at the Republican convention that's going on right now, we've had highlighted that story and maybe some others on the night where they were talking about crime. You know, the big debate we have right now going on is we have one party that is denying that crime is increasing, and we've got one party highlighting that crime is increasing. And the two studies that you've mentioned show the two exact problems that we have. We have one that's just going data, that's being data driven, like Yolo County, and we've got the other one that does so many hair splits to make it look like crime isn't going up. It's like, well, when you look at people that are doing this situation with this type of gun, with this, oh, crime's not increasing. By the time you get through reviewing it, you're like, how many times can we split that hair to get to that conclusion?
Yeah, I noticed that too. When I looked at the Drexler study, it was looking only at gun violence. And I thought, isn't that interesting that they're focusing only on gun violence? That's a very, very specific study on a very, very small subset of crime. Most crimes just don't, most crimes don't involve gun violence. They may involve guns, but not violence. So yeah, I saw that and I thought that looks like it's intentionally misleading. Uh, so yeah, we'll get into bail bond questions after the break. I've got one more question though before we take the break, and then we'll go hit bail bond questions really hard in the second half. When we talk about our prison system, I've always looked at it as almost like a national timeout system, like sending an errant child to their room to get them out of society for a period of time, let them think about what they did, and hopefully when they come back, they're better people. But it wasn't always like that. I look at 250 years ago, jail was where you were held until your sentence was carried out. Sentences usually involved a mixture of corporal punishment or public humiliation, or both. We gradually moved away from that in terms of punishment based on the Supreme Court interpreting, it might be wrong here, fine, please correct me, on the Supreme Court interpreting cruel and unusual punishments as if it says cruel or unusual instead. And to me, this national timeout system of punishment has been an abject failure based on any real metric somebody might choose to use. I guess my question is, what are your feelings on whether or not our system of using time as a primary form of punishment is proven to be a failure? And if so, what do you replace it with?
I don't agree that our prison systems have been a failure. In fact, I think that we have two situations or two different times in our history where they've been very successful. Both right, probably before we started loosening our laws currently, this current round of bail reform, criminal justice reform. But we went through all of this. It's like a cycle. We went through this in the 60s where we were feeling safe or safer. And so we started being more forgiving on our criminal laws. More people were released from jail. We started having crime increase. So we started having a national debate, and we had one party that refused to do anything to help address it. And so we had a backlash, and then we had the war on crime, and we got Reagan. We're doing the same thing now where we're feeling more safe. And so we started loosening our criminal laws. Look at what California did with Prop 47. And now they're in the middle of a proposition to repeal it because the ramifications from it have been so bad. And you're seeing that across the country. We felt more safe. we're more forgiving. Crime is now increasing, and now we have a backlash, and we have a complete refusal and a denial that crime is even going up by one party. And so we're going to have the same result we had in the 60s. We're going to have a backlash to the point where we're going to have the pendulum's going to swing completely to the opposite direction, and it's going to be just as bad as it was in the 60s. And the people that are refusing to not acknowledge crime is increasing are the ones that they should accept responsibility for that when the pendulum swings so hard again, because their refusal to work to find a solution that is successful is what's causing that.
So strict works.
Accountability works.
Accountability works. That's a good way of putting it. We're going to go ahead and start moving into the break. So metabolic dysfunction affects 87% of Americans, yet most people have never heard of it. According to the NIH, this is when metabolic health markers like cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, inflammation, or weight are out of whack. Often there are no symptoms, but left unattended, we become inundated with one health problem after another. Heal Right is a ready metabolic health bar with a synergistic blend of superfood ingredients to address nutritional root causes of metabolic dysfunction in as little as 8 weeks without additional diet or lifestyle changes. Heal Right is not just effective, it's also delicious and works without additional diet or lifestyle changes. Each bar contains a synergistic blend of superfood ingredients needed to support metabolic health, including 20 plus essential micronutrients, soluble and insoluble fiber, omega-3 fatty acids, 6 grams of proteins, antioxidants, and at 250 calories per serving, it is not a meal replacement. You still get to eat. Try Heal Right today. Go to healright.com and use promo code OUTLOUD for 20% off your first purchase. That's code OUTLOUD at healright.com. Personally, I use Heal Right to give me back some of the metabolism of my youth. I find that about an hour after I eat a Heal Right bar, I feel more mentally focused. I also have been able to remove myself completely from cholesterol medications. My wife eats a bar a day as well and agrees with me. Heal Right works. Along with a healthy diet and exercise, Heal Right can make all the difference in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We're going to hit bail reform hard in the second half of the show. We'll be right back. You are on Cutting Through the Chaos on America Out Loud.
World-class care from doctors you can trust, all from the comfort of your home. That is One Wellness. Dr. Peter McCullough and his team at The Wellness Company designed the One Wellness membership to provide free monthly supplements and unlimited telemedicine access with doctors that share your values. Go to OutLoudCare.com today and use code OUTLOUD for 25% off your first month of One Wellness.
Is your gut a mess? 2/3 of Americans suffer because of gastrointestinal issues, and I was one of them. That is why we created a 3-step, doctor-formulated, completely natural gut reboot system that you can do at home in just minutes a day. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get the Malcolm Healthy Gut Bundle, reboot your gut and your energy, and save 20% on your first order.
I'm Dr. James Bragman. Do you suffer from allergies, sinus problems, or just seem to be getting sick more often? You're not alone. Many of my patients are finding relief with Cofix RX nasal spray. I've relied on the sanitizing power of povidone iodine for years. Cofix RX has harnessed that power to help cleanse germs, allergens, and viruses in your nasal cavity. You brush your teeth and wash your hands daily. Stay healthy by using Cofix RX to wash and cleanse your nose daily. Get Cofix RX today. Go to America Out Loud Shop and click on the Cofix RX banner, or type in cofixrx.com/outloud. Buy now and receive a 20% discount with a 30-day money-back guarantee.
The buildup of spike proteins is dangerous to your health. Global Healing's Foreign Protein Cleanse detoxes your body, removing the spike proteins, allowing your body to repair from within. Formulated by Dr. Edward Group and by Dr. Brian Ardis, Foreign Protein Cleanse targets and detoxes spike proteins in the body. Go to AmericaOutloud.shop and get 15% off using the code OUTLOUD. Global Healing, giving you the power to take control of your health naturally.
Well, the year 2024 must be the year of the Patriot, and AmericaOutloud.news will equip you with all the information you need to give new meaning to the words Patriot Act. For our actions always ultimately define our words. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. is America Out Loud Talk Radio. Liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Cutting Through the Chaos of the America Out Loud Network. I'm your host, Wallace Garneau, and we are here again with Ken W. Good, a noted bail attorney and a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. We are here to talk about all of the problems we're having the second half of the show with bail bond. So let's get right into bail bond matters. Let's assume, Ken, for just a moment that in some areas there really is no increase in crime when cash bail is eliminated. I'm a little suspicious, as I said in the first half of the show, about that Drexler study, as it focuses only on gun violence and ignores all other crimes, which seems to be looking at an awfully specific and likely cherry-picked subset of crime. But let's assume for just a moment that there are areas where cash bail has been eliminated and crime has not gone up. I know that might be a ludicrous assumption, but let's just, for the sake of argumentation, make that assumption for just a moment. How much would you say the lack of a corresponding rise of crime is driven by the lack of a cause and effect relationship between the elimination of cash bail at those places and those higher crime rates, and how much of it is driven by lower rates of policing and lower rates of prosecution, even where policing occurs? So in New York City, for example, a lot of crimes simply aren't prosecuted anymore. In LA, you can now shoplift up to, I believe it's $950 worth of stuff, and it's not prosecuted at all. So obviously, if I'm counting prosecutions, and that's how I'm getting my crime statistics, if I just say I'm not going to prosecute crimes, it doesn't matter what I do with bail bonds. If I stop prosecuting crimes, I'm not going to get a rise in crime.
Well, let me tell you how hand in hand these two things go, because it's all on your appearance rate. I mean, there's no other form of release than the private industry that gets people to court. And so like Harris County started these simple release procedures, and immediately the DA said, well, the failure to appear rate's gone up by 50%. Then the police did a study for a week of just week's worth of dockets for the misdemeanor courts that were using mostly simple release, and they found a 75% failure to appear rate. And then HarrisCountyCourtWatch.com downloaded 2 years worth of data from the misdemeanor courts and used the same formulas and found a 2-year average of an 80% failure to appear rate. And the Yolo County DA, he says that's simple release is what they use across California for misdemeanors, and they have the same thing, an 80% failure to appear rate. Well, criminal cases can't go forward without the defendant. So if you have 80% of your defendants not showing up, then that creates utter chaos, because you can't go forward on their case, and you're just constantly adding more cases to the hopper. And so at some point you have, like in California, you have a deadline to go to court or dismiss the case. So you can outlast the court. You can have the case dismissed just from time. And what does that do? That sends a green light to criminals that we can get away with committing more crime. That's how your misdemeanor cases suddenly become the training ground for tomorrow's felony cases, because it creates so much accountability. You can't hold anybody accountable, and then nobody's showing up for court. And then what do you know? Who's shocked that crime's going up when that's happening?
So you're saying that if I go out and I rob from a liquor store and I get arrested, and they rein me and send me out cash with cash-free bail, so I'm back out in the street, and I go out and rob another liquor store, and they arrest me, and I go in front of arraignment, and I get out on cash-free bail, and I go ahead and I do it again, and I get out on bail, and I do it again, and I get out on cash-free bail. I read about a kid, I think it was on Fox News, but on Fox News or the Daily Wire, whatever it was. I read about a kid in New York, and I shouldn't say he's a kid. I'm sure he's an adult, younger than me, though. So I read about this guy in New York that was bragging that he'd been arrested more than 120 times and had not spent a night in jail. Is that what you're talking about, where I can just continue to commit crimes, but because there's a length of time for each one of them where they can start the trial, they just throw it out?
Well, no, but that's very related. So when you do this charge-based release system, it is similar, because no matter how many times you get arrested, since we've decided that if you get arrested for that crime, you're going to be released on cashless bail. No matter how many times you get arrested, you're going to be released by simple release, because that's a charge-based release mechanism system. What I'm saying is, okay, you get arrested, you get arraigned, they give you a pinky swear bond where you're just promising to show up. That's what simple release is. And you don't show up. Well, then on that case, not the next one and the next one, but on that case, it's put on hold until you come back into the criminal justice system. And let's just make it even worse. It's a misdemeanor in California and you go to the next state, Nevada, you're just going to stay in LA for a while. They don't extradite anymore for misdemeanors. So you can avoid criminal prosecution completely by just going to the next state. Or if you just don't get arrested again, or worse, they stop arresting people for that crime, but you've got a case in the system. They can't make you go back to court because they're not going to arrest you for failing to appear for a misdemeanor. That case is just going to eventually get dismissed.
We're talking just misdemeanors there. Are we talking felonies too?
Well, the problem with this bail reform system is that what they're doing with misdemeanors then starts bleeding over to felonies. Like Harris County is a great example where nobody that was charged with murder or capital murder was ever released on a personal bond until all this bail reform mumbo jumbo. And then suddenly we were demanding that judges release people charged with capital murder on a personal bond. And it started happening. I mean, it got to the point where I've started arguing that in Harris County, in Houston, the third largest county in the country, you got one free murder, like a vicious dog. You got one free bite before they declared that you were dangerous. You got one free murder before they were going to hold you in the jail. So you had to commit a second murder before they'd refuse to release you. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, let's say that I commit one crime and I wait until just before they're going to throw that out because I didn't show up, obviously, for court, and I wait until just before they're going to throw that out, and I commit another crime, and they're both misdemeanors or felonies that the system works on. Does the clock start over for the first crime?
No, they'll bring you into court. I mean, they'll bring you in, they'll magistrate, they'll give you simple release on the second one. And they'll probably give you simple release on the first one, and you'll promise to show up for court, and they'll set a short court date, and then you won't show up, and then your case will ultimately be dismissed.
So if I never show up for court, basically I never go to jail, no matter how many crimes I commit.
Well, it depends. At some point you would hope, like in Texas, at some point they'll come, they'll quit doing this. I mean, I don't know. In Houston, I don't know if they'll ever quit. We've got situations where people were granted 16 bonds in one case, and that tells you how many times they didn't show up for court. But here's the problem is, like in Harris County, when we started pointing all these problems out, they quit requiring people to show up for court. So, oh no, you don't have to come to court unless we request it. And so if they dismiss the case, they don't have to have them come to court. So they start playing games with that. I mean, we're getting people to come to court and stare at the judge and stare at the prosecutor, how cases are, settled, or they plead guilty for a lesser sentence. But if they don't ever come to court, how can you get people to plead? You can't. And if they're not there, the only thing you can do is dismiss.
How about for the crime of coming into the country illegally? Is it the same thing there, where they give you a date to come in for your, I'm assuming these people are claiming asylum, but you get a date for your asylum hearing and then you just never show up for it. What happens there?
Well, okay. That's, a different system, because bail or the crimes are governed by the different states.
Yeah, and this is federal, sure.
But that's federal, and it's not a criminal proceeding. It's a civil proceeding, and bail set there is it's a whole completely different system. But you're going to show up. They're going to either admit you to bail, federal, immigration bond. And then they're going to give you a hearing date. And, most people that get those don't show up, and they're just in society living. And again, it's even worse there. I mean, you're going to have to commit another crime for anybody to know that you violated your order to appear.
So they're basically playing catch and release. It's like fishing, and you put the fish back in every time you catch one, just goes right back into the pond.
It can, but a lot of times when they have an immigration hold, they'll get arrested in the state system. And so when they post a bond, that would release them from the state system, but then they would be turned over to ICE. But, the problem there is, well, then ICE gets them and deports them. So they avoid punishment for their state crime. And like the two cases that are pending in Harris County where they killed the 13-year-old girl, they're like, oh, there's ICE holds, so they'll never get out of jail, even though the bond set at $3 million. I'm like, no, if somebody was stupid enough to post the $3 million bond, they would get released to ICE custody and then ICE would deport them. That's what they want, because then they would avoid prosecution.
Sure.
I mean, so people don't understand how the system works. I mean, we don't want them released, and but that's an example of a problem we have with the current system. Families are happy to say, oh yeah, we're here legally. So you don't know that there's an ICE hold, and then you post bail. Well, then it's a race. So now they've been released to ICE to then be deported, and the bondsman's going to be responsible for paying that full amount of that bond if they don't appear. And once they get deported, then you're not going to have a defense. You're just going to owe the money. And so bondsmen don't want people to get out of jail who have ICE holds, who are going to be deported, because that hurts them more than anybody.
Sure.
But the problem is, I mean, the laws are built to keep that information from us, and we're working with families. And if they decide to misrepresent the truth, then those things happen, and we are racing to get a warrant issued to bring them back before they're deported.
Well, it's a double-edged sword too, because I mean, we've known for years that states like California will not release people to ICE because they don't want them to be deported. In many cases, they just release them back out into the system because they don't want to release them to ICE where they may get deported. But now you're saying that if you follow federal law and release them to ICE, then that's a problem also, because they just deport them and they never get tried for the crime they actually committed.
That's right.
That's
right. In California, I've just read an article recently where the immigration situation in California should be reaching a tipping point soon. And it's going to be over this marijuana business profile that they've set up, because they've set up this whole legalized system and they're going to make so much money off of it. And it's completely failed. And the cartels are stepping in and taking over the system, and they're continuing their illegal operations, and a lot of immigrants that are brought to this country illegally are brought to work in that industry for them.
Sure.
And it's a growing and growing problem. And, if you believe, like I do, that 80% of all crime arises indirectly or directly from the drug problems, well, then you can see that, we're not going to have public safety, and it's going to get to a tipping point really quickly if we don't take a stand.
Well, the drug problems, I mean, my God, there's enough fentanyl coming into this country to kill every man, woman, and child. I'm surprised nobody's made a bomb out of fentanyl yet, because it takes such a little small amount to kill somebody. You would think that could be weaponized like sarin gas or something. I know it's a particulate, so it's not the same as sarin, but you would think somebody could weaponize that. That's what scares the hell out of me.
Well, I did not realize that, all the things about fentanyl, and that, I mean, it's really, really bad. But, how many drugs today are mixed with fentanyl?
Well, everything.
And people say, well, why would they do that? There's a commercial on TV. Why would drug dealers mix fentanyl with? Because it's so cheap. And if you do it in the right amount, you can make your profit margin on your heroin, your cocaine drugs go up. It's just when you get the mixture wrong, it kills people. And it doesn't take, I mean, we're not dealing with rocket scientists here. We're dealing with drug dealers who are trying to make more money.
Well, in a drug that it takes such a ridiculously small amount to kill that it's almost impossible to get it right consistently unless you've got a really professional lab. But back to bail bond. If I play devil's advocate for just a moment, because I do think the other side of the debate has some good points, it seems there are two basic reasons to allow to eliminate cash bail. One is the wealthier someone is, the easier time they have being able to afford the bail. So there's a fairness question there. And the other is that it represents a way to reduce incarceration rates without letting convicted felons, which is to say those who have actually been found guilty of a crime in our court system, out. Is it true that those who are poor have a harder time putting up cash bail than those who are not? Is there a system that is for people that don't have money to still be able to put up something for cash bail?
Well, yes, I completely disagree with that. Those are problems. And especially, the federal courts have said this simple release needs to be an alternative. It needs to be something that's available when, for the poor. But as the courts have both held, the private industry system is constitutional. And here's the big problem. To be able to use something else, you have to have something that is an alternative that works as well. There's a mayor who used to be a former judge who was on a News Nation town hall talking about this very issue. And she said, look, until you have an alternative to the private industry that has the same high appearance rate and the same high accountability, then you don't have an alternative. And so, we're pushing these simple release mechanisms that have a high failure to appear rate and no accountability. So they are not alternatives. And so my point I come to, you can say it's not fair. You can say that it hurts some people when I completely disagree with it, but you don't have any alternative that performs as well and that doesn't create chaos and problems with accountability and creates more crime.
I have to ask one more question as a devil's advocate. Is it easier to stand trial in terms of the likelihood of being found not guilty if someone is out on bond versus somebody who stays incarcerated because they can't afford the bond?
Okay. I think that's probably yes, but I dispute the premise. I mean, to say that you're either going to be in jail or you're going to be out on the private industry bond is not correct, because the court will review you. I mean, I think they should do it on a limited basis to say, okay, are you poor? All right, well then what's the alternative to a cash bond? What can you do? But the problem with that is, hey, okay, I'm going to release you. What if we overlaid a high system of accountability so that if you get a simple release and then you don't show up for court, you're not eligible for another simple release because you had your option. Give them twice, give them 2 times. You had your chance. You had 2 chances. You don't get anything after that.
Well,
that's the problem we're having.
When you say give them a time or 2 times, it sounds like you're getting, I was going to ask that in a couple of questions. It sounds like you're saying that there's a possibility where maybe if you have never skipped on bail, we might let you out once. But once you skip on bail, sorry, buddy, you don't get a second shot. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I think that would be a better than what we're doing right now. The problem is the appearance rate is so much lower for any simple release mechanism. So that's why it needs to be used very rarely.
How about house arrest?
Okay.
Or an anklet of some kind, so you know where they are, you can pick them up.
So do you know using a GPS monitor on you, they're making you pay for it. It's more expensive to pay for that than to pay for private bail.
Is it really?
Oh my God, you're paying a fee per day. So if you pay $20 a day times 30, that's just 1 month. I mean, well, let's make it $5 a day. But if you're paying it for every 30 days and you're having to pay it to stay out of jail for house arrest. I mean, house arrest, I don't think with a GPS monitor I think it's worse than having a private bondsman. You're not checking in with anybody. You're just charging your monitor. And what happens if you just cut it off? I mean, we've had too many examples in Texas where we discovered that nobody's doing the monitoring on the GPS on the weekends because they didn't have the money to have somebody there monitoring them on the weekends or after 5. So if you just cut it off after 5, nobody would know about it till the next day at 9. Those are not alternatives.
No, that doesn't sound very workable at all. So basically what you're saying is cash bail is here to stay. There is no alternative. Earlier in the show, you were talking about the cycle of crime where we start getting stricter on crime, as Rudy Giuliani did years ago in New York. Mm-hmm. The crime rates dry up. And if the crime rates dry up, obviously that means fewer people in prison because you're not filling them up over and over. Maybe you have more people going in once, but you're not refilling them as they're coming out. And then you say that as we get leaner on crime, what happens is when crime pays, people commit more of it, I guess might be one way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
Yes. I would even say, when you have the city of Houston, you have a city within the city and you have, a small percentage of people who are committing a large part of the crime. But then between the two cities, there's this gray area and, they're looking to see how's the crime city performing? Are they getting away with it? Well, if they're getting away with more and more crime, they're like, well, I'm joining that because that looks pretty good and they're not having any penalties. But if they see accountability being overlaid to that, they're like, ooh, I don't want that. I'm going to be in the law abiding part of the city. And so there's a good example. There's a case called Sanchez versus Alabama that was where the county had to live under one of these injunctions for simple release for both felonies and misdemeanors. They had to do it for 4 years as they appealed, and they ultimately won the appeal. But during that 4 years, crime started going up because they could not hold people. They could not hold them accountable because they were living under an injunction that just said crime-based release. So
it sounds like you're almost creating like a redlining situation where if you want to have people with a high crime rate in one municipality, mm-hmm. You say we're going to have no cash bail there. And if you want to have a lower crime rate in another municipality, you say we're going to have cash bail here, and you can actually get all of the crime to go where the cash bail, where the cash free system is, and then the people in the other systems. So we're actually, is that a two-tiered society?
Well, I do know that in Montgomery County, which is right next to Harris County, they arrested some guys for catalytic theft one night, and they were driving to the jail, the county jail, and the guys were like, well, this isn't the way to the Harris County jail. And they're like, well, sorry guys, I hate to tell you this, but you veered into Montgomery County, and Montgomery County prosecutes crime. And so they were all upset a whole way to the jail because they had veered out into Montgomery County, and Montgomery County's built a sign on county line on Highway 45 that says, this is Montgomery County. We support the police and we prosecute crime.
Yeah, they won't make that mistake again. That's right. Yeah. They won't make that mistake again. I got to ask this. California's number one export these past 3.5 years have been people. Is Texas, and Texas is getting more of those people than any other state. But Texas is also getting a lot of people from over the border. I'm curious, two things. Is Texas getting more people from over the border or from California? And secondly, are the people moving from California taking their politics with them?
Okay, so more people are moving from California than illegal immigrants are entering into Texas currently, but that's only because Texas has spent billions of dollars building a wall like Trump was doing. And so they have really spent a bunch of money building walls and using the National Guard or to prevent people from coming into Texas. And so you start to see all those people moving over into other states. In fact, there's a story out in the last week where the Biden administration has started taking people that are coming into California and then shipping them to Texas without Texas's knowledge because Texas has decreased. I mean, in fact, Biden in, all the stuff he's been doing in the last 2 weeks, he has been, taking credit for, illegal immigration entries in Texas going down. It absolutely has zero to do with him. In fact, he's been filing suits to stop what Texas is trying to do.
I want to thank you for coming, Ken. It was great conversation. We're unfortunately out of time, but I think we got through everything I wanted to cover. For our listeners, that as always, thank you for tuning in. Please tell others who might be interested in cutting through the chaos to listen in either on Saturday and Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or on podcast whenever they have time. And we will see you next week at the same time and place. It will be, once again, time to get involved and to get loud on America Out Loud.